I love that you titled today's session Research with Empathy.
Something that we can chat about maybe after this conversation.
Yes, and we need to help them find the best way that they can function and live their lives.
Sometimes I think the simplest answers are the most difficult ones to accept.
Yes, but what we like to do at Manovikas is have it all under one roof.
We are going to be talking about children and young adults.
But we were actually able to see which child was responding to atomoxetine and which wasn't, who wasn't.
Hello and welcome to the Lifelong Learning Podcast. This is our second episode and I'm Sohini from the School for Lifelong Learning. Today we have a very important conversation that we are bringing to you. The topic may be of interest, but also it's not a very common one. The topic is research with empathy. So we are going to be talking about ethics, we are going to be talking about consent and dignity in disability research. And who better to talk about it but our guest today, who is the Dean of Research and Development at Manovikas Kendra, a pioneering institution working to support young children and young adults with disabilities and well, we won't call it disabilities actually, that's a wrong term. We would like to call it, we are going to be talking about children and young adults who are specially abled, neurodivergent, and who are equally important for all of us to consider as equal members of our society. So this conversation is going to be very, very interesting. Stay tuned till the end. And with that, I'll move to introduce Dr. Madhura Lohia. Thank you so much, Madhura, for being here with us.
Thank you. Thank you, Sohini. Thank you for having me. And thank you for thinking of Manovikas and this area of research which we are a part of, which may seem very small, but is so important to both biology and society. Thank you.
That's so true. We are very excited to talk about Manovikas Kendra as a model and also your journey as a researcher contributing to this field, because we don't get to hear about science and empathy at the same time. We don't get to hear about cases and stories of science impacting lives in real time. So I'd like to begin by asking you a little bit about your journey and what brought you to this kind of work. Tell us a little bit about the origin story of Manovikas Kendra.
Sure. So I'll begin with Manovikas Kendra first. It's older than me, believe it or not. So Manovikas Kendra was founded by my grandmother, Dr. Sharda Fatehpuria. She was a PhD in psychology from Kolkata University in the early 60s. And when she began her work in psychology, she saw these children who were considered sort of, at that time, you know, we didn't, the terminology used was retardation. And she felt that it didn't mean, retardation didn't mean that these children could not be educated, that they could not become working members of society. And so she began Manovikas Kendra in my grandparents' house. You know, they didn't have any other spaces. So with 4 children in a small room, with a lot of support from my grandfather and her mother-in-law, they began teaching these children. And she found that, you know, she saw progress. So it wasn't that a child who is differently able cannot learn, they just learn differently. You know, all of us learn differently, and so do they. From those 4 children today, 52 years later, Manovikas Kendra has grown into an institution which has served over 10,000 children and their families over the last 5 decades. It continues to serve at least 400 to 500 children at a regular basis. So that's really the Manovikas origin story. What also is part of the origin is, maybe initially it was started as a school, but she soon saw the need not just for teaching, but for proper diagnosis. So we had a clinical team come in, and a psychiatrist would now look at these kids and talk to their parents and talk to them and try and figure out what their actual different requirements were, how better they could be supported, whether it was medication or not, what kind of therapies we could give them. You know, in the earlier days, it was sort of occupational therapy, physical therapy, as we continue to do today. So she built a clinical team into our infrastructure. And from there, we also evolved to, about 25 years ago, built in a research team.
Okay.
And it is a research team that specializes in translational research. So it is the Center for Translational Research at Manovikas Kendra. And what we look to do is actually examine molecular markers, try and see if we can identify specific genetic variants in this Indian population. And we also look to work with all of the other therapies that occur at Manovikas Kendra to try and see if the child is being helped or not. So the origin story sort of began with a very small kernel and has grown into this massive tree that has multiple branches that all come together to provide this holistic support system for neurodivergent children and their families.
That's beautiful. So what I hear from the way the concept evolved is that you built, the team built an ecosystem of
Yes.
care, support, and also of education,
Yes.
so educational support. So there must be a lot of stories that you have about how this has tangibly reflected in the way it has, you know, impacted the children's lives,
Yeah.
their parents. So I guess there's also a community angle to it. You help the families also understand
Absolutely.
how to give that ecosystem of support. So could you maybe tell us a little bit about the model and how it can be perhaps replicated in other contexts?
Yeah. So, you know, the Manovikas model is at best very simple. And at worst very complex. But when I say simple is, you know, someone with a neurodevelopmental disorder, which is what many of the children who come to us present with, they have multiple needs, not just because they are neurodevelopmentally challenged, but also because they are children, they live in society. And we need to help them find the best way that they can function and live their lives. So what our model does is we start at assessment. So your GP, your pediatrician tells a parent, or a teacher may tell a parent, you know, I think they need some extra support that I can't give. I think we need to look at what is wrong. And they come to us, and a psychiatrist and a psychologist and their entire team get involved with the parents. They interview the parents, they talk to the child, we have some simple tests that they undergo, and they then help diagnose them. Now it's important to remember, you know, everyone talks about autism spectrum disorders, ASD. It sort of seems to be a very common use in you know, childhood today. But autism spectrum disorder can only currently be diagnosed by a psychiatrist. So there are a series of psychometric tests or a psychometric sort of list that a psychiatrist goes through, which can range from whether the child makes eye contact or is able to walk straight or has depth perception issues, to how socially a child might be challenged. It can also depend on whether the child has sensory issues, how they respond to light, to sound, to music, you know, to their mother's voice or the touch of a parent. So there are multiple angles at which a psychiatrist looks at neurodevelopmentally challenged children and then is able to diagnose them with maybe being on this autism spectrum, or maybe having hyperactivity, or possibly having a different disorder.
Okay.
Where our research team plays in right then is that we are also involved in some blood diagnosis. So diagnostics are not the, blood markers are maybe not the be all and end all of our actual diagnosis, but we can provide supportive patterns to the psychiatrist to help her help the child. So it starts out with if the psychiatrist feels she wants to test some genetic markers. So we do we do a blood test and we do look for these genetic markers that the psychiatrist might be interested in, and we may be able to diagnose a child with Down syndrome or Fragile X syndrome or Klinefelter syndrome, one of these things. So we have that kind of assessment, which is the clinical part of it. And then based on the child's needs and the age of the child and so on and so forth, the psychiatrist and her team will recommend the therapies, which could start with physiotherapy or hydrotherapy, occupational therapy. We would like to have parent and child classes where the parent and the child speak to each other and are able to have an environment in which the child can learn and the parent can learn how to communicate to their child. And then we start there. And then the hope is always that we bring the parent and child to a level where the child can basically go into a regular school with their friends, with the tools that they need, understanding their differences to be able to tell a school. Maybe if you were the teacher and I was the psychiatrist, I could tell you, they just need a little bit of help when they're learning such and such to read this part out aloud, or could they have some extra time to finish their exam? And more and more schools and teachers are becoming very, very inclusive about that kind of education. And that's our best case scenario. Sometimes a child may have very severe symptoms and may not be able to be around neurotypical children. And so those children, we actually, we have a sort of a setup also, which can be called a school, but it's also a center for education therapy.
Okay.
So they are given life skills training from anywhere from like sitting on a chair and learning to sit in one place, to eating their own food, to making their own food, like learning how to make a sandwich and so on and so forth. And then many of them start learning. They learn the ABCs and learn how to do maths and count money and all of that stuff. They learn to go on adventures with their colleagues. So they take a bus somewhere and they learn to go to a supermarket, and they learn all kinds of life skills. Some of our kids also, we are a nodal center for the National Open Schooling System, National Institute of Open Schooling, the NIOS, and many of our children are under the NIOS system. So they are able to pass their class 10 and class 12 exams, but they just have certain, they're allowed to sort of be in school for a bit longer, for as long as it takes. They're also given, help in, they'll have a reader or a writer for their exam if they need it. They can have some extra time to finish their exam if they so need it. So we have both those systems, and we also finally have a center for vocational training. And the vocational training center deals with helping children who are different find their little corner where they have purpose and can contribute to society. Because ultimately, we feel that the only way to truly build an inclusive society is when everyone is contributing to it and is made to feel that they are a contributing member of society. So our kids learn to bake, to cook, and we have a little cafe. Come and try it sometime.
I actually have.
Yeah,
when we did visit, I must say, and this is to the audience, the cafe is beautiful and they have the best muffins. I think orange flavored muffins. They are the best I've had till date, and I look forward to having more.
Yes,
definitely.
Soon.
It's open generally on
all weekdays. Yeah,
on all weekdays. So you should go and definitely check them out.
Oh, thank you.
But what makes me very happy to learn over here is how safe the kids must feel, that they feel that they can express themselves, that they are and that families are gradually becoming more open to learning more about the research in this area, the different ways in which support can be extended to these kids without like giving up on them, because I think earlier that used to be pretty much the norm, that they would be abandoned or they would be kind of labeled, and then they would find it very difficult to socialize, to actually have a healthy environment to grow in. So the fact that you're providing that kind of an ecosystem is beautiful. Now, I understand that this kind of work would also mean that you have to have regular conversations possibly with parents, informing them about the kind of research, the kind of diagnosis, the kind of breakthroughs you could expect, and also the limitations.
Yes.
So as a life sciences researcher heading a team, how would you say that experience has been for you over the past 50 years? I know you probably weren't there for all the 50 years, but then I'm sure there's been a gradual evolution of that conversation as well. So if you could tell us a little more about that.
Definitely. I think obviously one of our big challenges in life science research is that we require live cells. So the work that we do, the markers that we look for, requires blood work. So that's been a massive challenge, because I think if we took a consensus of this room today, there will be at least half the room hates needles and doesn't like to give blood. Yes. Yeah, there we go. And it's extremely hard to explain to a child whom you can't communicate with that you need to, draw blood. So that's a major challenge for us, and the parent obviously doesn't want to put the child in distress. So a lot of our work not just focuses on research, but also in creating communication systems with the parent, with the help of the clinicians that work with us as well as ourselves, to explain to them why we need the blood. I'm going to give you a little example of the kinds of ways in which life science research can impact a particular field. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD, is very commonly known. There are a lot of children now in society who are being accurately diagnosed with ADHD. And while certain children are fine with, sort of non-pharmaceutical type of therapies, some children do need medication. Now, there is a series of tests that we call ADHD genotyping. And genotyping means sort of typifying the kinds of genes you have. So it's looking at your genes and seeing where you fall in a population. And while ADHD genotyping might mean that what kind of ADHD you have, that's not what it refers to. We actually look at the genes that metabolize the drugs that are given to children for ADHD. So some of the work that we did, which has been done by other groups in other countries, but we were the first to do it in India, was to show that there is a liver enzyme which metabolizes one of the main drugs that is given to children with ADHD, called atomoxetin. We were able to find in our research that certain children responded to atomoxetin better than others. Right? So normally if you're given a drug, the doctor would say, okay, they're not responding, we'll change the drug. But we were actually able to see which child was responding to atomoxetin and who wasn't. And what we were able to do from that is we found certain groups of children who would just never respond. They were not able to metabolize the drug. We found some children who would metabolize the drug so fast that it couldn't have an effect on their body. We found certain children who were normal metabolizers, if we can use that word, and we found some that were so slow in metabolizing the drug that it would stay in their system for so long that they had other symptoms, which made the parent not give them the drug. And what we really were able to do by classifying these genotypes in India was that the doctor can now do this test before they prescribe atomoxetin. Right. So what ends up happening is that now if we have certain genetic variants that we see, the doctor can say, you know what, this person is a slow metabolizer for this drug. I can't just prescribe 10 mg of drug based on the fact that they are 30 kilos. Okay. I now need to prescribe 5 mg and they need to take it twice a day because they are slow metabolizers, so that it lies in their system in the proper way and they're actually able to use it. If they're very fast metabolizers, again they give a slow release form of the drug, which helps the child have the best possible outcome from a drug. So now we haven't diagnosed in life sciences maybe, we've used, here you have sort of this holistic sort of care system, right? So you have a child who's having problems in school, a parent who's having problems at home, they're approaching us in the clinical sense, we diagnose them. And then the doctor, before prescribing a drug, is now coming to the research team and the diagnostic team and saying, can you please tell me if this child is a good candidate for this drug? And we do the test before we give the child the drug, so they are less likely to reject it.
That's fascinating. That means it has a very custom approach.
Absolutely.
To looking at
Absolutely.
what kind of care individuals need.
Yes.
That's very unique. I don't think it is normal medical practice so far.
I believe that there are everyone would like to use this system, but what ends up happening is you go to the doctor, and then you go to a testing center or a diagnostic center, and then you go back to school, and then you go to the teacher. But what we like to do at Manovikas is have it all under one roof. For a child who doesn't like going into, you use the word safe.
Yes.
They get used to this environment. They know that here they're safe. Everyone here is their advocate. And that allows them to open up, be themselves, maybe even relax enough to give us a little bit of blood so that, we can do the test. And that's really, I believe that that's been the successful part of our model. Having everything under one roof. So even, they know that they can go play in the garden, or we have the hydrotherapy. The hydrotherapy is such a big success because look at this heat in Kolkata today. To be able to jump into a pool, a cool pool for kids it's both relaxing. For kids with sensory issues or kids who are extremely hyperactive, they feel calmer. And then they're able to learn their lessons better. They're able to, interact with their peers in a calmer way and have some more fun. And be children, be children in an environment that's maybe custom made for them.
I think it's so important that your team is putting together so much thought and so much heart into shaping a space where children can be children without being judged for once.
Yes.
Or not have that pressure to conform, which actually makes them individuals who are probably going to grow up and be a little more fearless in facing the world, because I cannot imagine how difficult it must be for children who grow up conscious that they are different.
Yes.
And they're constantly made to feel that they're different. So that's a lot of heart and a lot of thought, and it's indeed commendable. We don't hear of such stories or such spaces a lot. But that takes me to the next part, which is self-representation of these children. So how would you say that, if we look at the policy and ethics side of it, how would you say that we can dignify their lives and their individualities by allowing them to have more spaces for self-expression? What kind of spaces would be best suited for them to express themselves? Would you say that one day they can be on a podcast like this?
Absolutely.
They can
yes.
perhaps have conversations in public. What would you say is the best way to empower? In fact, I don't know if empower would be the word, or to enable rather, to enable or facilitate them. Sorry, I'm also learning to use the right terms. We were never coached to you've kind of answered your question yourself. Is the only way we can do it. I think I read a lovely quote. I'm forgetting now, but there's a wonderful psychiatrist who's an influencer who had come to visit us, and she said something, and she said true inclusion is a world that makes those who are different feel part of it. And that is really all we need. We don't always need people to create something like we don't need to make a Taj Mahal for everybody. Yeah.
But how do I allow access to someone? We are having a lovely conversation with Papia ma'am, the head of your lovely lifelong learning institution. And one of the conversations we were having is when someone is when their disability is not physically obvious, we tend to not show them empathy. If somebody is not able to climb stairs, yes, we can tell them, oh, there's a ramp here, there's a lift here, so on and so forth. But if somebody cannot they can read letters but cannot comprehend what they're reading, we don't tend to have sympathy for them, you know, or even empathy with them. And we need to slowly educate ourselves and our, you know, neurotypical people, like maybe like you and me. You know, the world was kind of created for us, by us.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
the neurodivergent community may be different, but can be part of our world by us making very small tweaks into our lives. I want to give you a little example. So our 8, 9, 10-year-olds, there is a school which has neurotypical children, very, very famous school near us. And their 8, 9, 10-year-olds last year or last semester came every Friday for 2 hours to hang out with our kids. So every child was assigned to either the baking section or the games section or the dance section or the art section. And it was supposed to be 4 Fridays, and on the 3rd or the 4th Friday, I saw this little boy from that school walking away crying, and he said, well, I want to come every Friday because they are my friends now. And I think, you know, what a lovely way to have inclusive societies. We just need to meet each other in the spaces that we feel safe in, and we find love, right? We were not adults, we're just 10-year-olds talking to each other. And then our kids went to that school and they started playing with them. I'm going to show you the pictures later when you and I are talking. You will not know which child goes to which school. They're just sitting around, you know, they're sitting like 10-year-olds awkwardly, hands over each other, you know, playing. And so such a small exercise, 8 hours, was able to create an inclusive community for 10-year-olds. We didn't have to do anything. And if you think about it, how little is needed. We definitely have the policies in place. You know, the Indian education boards are trying to ensure that we're more inclusive. All schools are mandated to be, you know, more inclusive environments. They have special educators. But I think, and I know that there are, for example, there are legal channels for families of neurodivergent children. So their parents have ways to create trusts for them and, you know, ensure that there is care for them even after they are passed, and, you know, so on and so forth. But we need to create more awareness around all of these issues. You know, all of us need to be aware that these roots exist. This is something we keep doing for parents at our center, is keep updating them on what kind of information is coming out, what resources are available to them. Alongside that, I think what we really need is for society to have more interactions like those 10-year-olds. You know, just enough time together for us to see we're not that different. You know, we need not be afraid of each other. So it's very simple answers, but we need to do more of it together.
Sometimes I think the simplest answers are the most difficult ones to accept.
Yes.
It's because we're so accustomed to certain systems or certain ways of thinking. I think that is what comes in the way.
Yeah.
Now, having learned from you about the scope of the research, the kind of work that Manovikas Kendra has done, now I'd like to come to your journey a little bit. So I know I started with that, and we completely forgot about that part. But I'd like you to come back to how life sciences research has shaped you, and how your work with the community, with the people, with the children at Manovikas Kendra has shaped you as a researcher, and how it continues to shape you. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about how researchers could, you know, get down into the field, dirty their hands, and do the actual work that creates lasting impact, measurable lasting impact, and also breakthroughs that may help and touch so many lives, like you're doing at Manovikas Kendra already. So a little more about that, please.
So I began my career, I studied biochemistry and neuroscience. I did my master's in biochemistry under your esteemed Pro-Chancellor, Professor Dhrubajyoti Chattopadhyay, who's been a mentor of mine. I always knew I wanted to study life science, and I went to the US to do my PhD. And actually, that's where my journey with understanding how science engages with society sort of came to be understood. One thing I'd like to say is I definitely feel like science has everyday impacts in society. You and I are being recorded and filmed today because of science. We will go out to the world almost instantly if we like. We might take a selfie at the end of this session together and send it to our friends, and that is on a device that is the result of scientific research and work and education. And so all of these things, are constantly impacting us. But for me with life sciences, when I was doing my PhD, I happened to be funded by a grant that was tilted towards cancer research.
Okay.
And one of the requirements of the grant was that I had to go down and volunteer at the hospital. There was a hospital in the university that I was in, at the University of Virginia, and I still remember, you're doing this teeny tiny research that's on one cell under a microscope that you can't see without the microscope, with your naked eye. And I'm thinking, I'm solving the world's problems. And I would go down to the hospital and I'd see these cancer patients and their families and what they were going through. And I had the privilege of sitting on medical boards, so they allow you to, observe, and hearing how doctors sort of talked about a patient and, talked about their families and how could they help them. And, depending on the patient and what their what life stage they were in, what they wanted from life, the doctor would then advise them based on, if it's a very young person, aggressive therapy, but if it's an old person, they would say, this person, he just wants enough to have 3 months with his grandchildren or something. It was very moving for me to see how that ecosystem of care worked. And it really convinced me that as much as I love primary research, being able to be with people and to be able to help in whatever way I could was my calling. And so I have taken many routes since. I have been an entrepreneur in life science. I had a company and I have exited that company. I've also worked with scientific communications and again with medical professionals who are trying to decide on treatment strategies and so on and so forth. But coming to Manovikas sort of felt like this circle was complete for me. Walking through the doors, seeing these incredible children and their incredible parents who are really dealing with a problem that sometimes they may feel unseen or unheard, and yet they go through life smiling and hoping to find an answer to their problems. And I know that in most cases we can't find a cure. Let's say, in the traditional sense, someone might meet me and say, I'd love it if you could find a cure for autism spectrum disorder. I think every researcher who's working in the field would love it. But what we could do is maybe make certain things easier, like the ADHD genotyping example I gave you. And that is a very, very satisfying thing that we get to do. So I personally feel, I love that you titled today's session Research with Empathy. I think creating care circles that include research is extremely important, both for the circle of care as well as for science itself to have better impact on society, I think.
That's fascinating, something that we can chat about maybe after this conversation.
Yes, absolutely.
But I really like what I hear about you mentioning how it is important to consider individual cases, individual people, and what they need, what they would prefer. While the diagnostics can help you understand the challenges and the difficulties, but I somewhere feel, and correct me if I'm wrong, I somewhere feel that the word cure automatically connotes to something that is wrong.
Yes.
And when we are thinking about acceptance and inclusion, when we are thinking about a no judgment space for people to just evolve and be themselves, these kids to actually grow up wholly accepting themselves and staying in their power in that way, to be able to bring their incredible gifts to the world. It is so important for us to also be very particular about these particular terms. So from, as you mentioned, that from mentally retarded to first disabilities or differently abled to these days the term specially abled or neurodivergent. There are so many different ways each of these words portray a certain section of the population. And that brings us to the very end of this podcast, and we close with this. We'd love for you to give us a message to fellow researchers who may be looking at prospects in the future on how to contribute. I think every researcher would want to contribute, like you rightly said, in things that they can see that in their lifetime is making an impact. It's one thing to be doing that in a lab, and it's one thing when you actually see that you put a human face on it and you see that, oh, this is the way it has impacted so many lives. So if you have any such message for fellow researchers and also for parents and society as a whole, where how could we show up better to make the space a little bit more acceptable, a little less judgmental, a little safer, and a little more welcoming for such individuals?
I think my answer to both sets of people that you talked about, or my message would be to communicate. We are in the age of communication. We are in the age of instant communication. We were having a conversation earlier, you and I, about how I like going trekking, and my phone is off and I'm not able to communicate. My parents don't know if I'm well, for example. My family doesn't know where I am. And yet, in today's day and age, I am, maybe we're all in different parts of the world, and yet I have friends from all over the world that I can communicate with right now by picking up my little phone. However, as we are able to communicate more, somehow we are not always communicating on all of the things that matter. And so maybe all of us just communicate. I mean, researchers, I think they do phenomenal work. Even the ones who are doing primary research, I'm a primary research person, that's what I did my PhD in. If I could, communicate with the world the kind of work that I did and why it's important. So, some people might say, oh, who cares about a cell in a microscope? But that's where research starts, to get us to the therapies that make an impact. Actually, everyone has a role to play in that ladder, and if we could communicate that to the outside world, maybe there would be a much better understanding of what science is and how it makes your life better. And I think the same goes for making our wonderful neurodivergent, specially abled kids' lives better, is to just communicate a lot better. Find channels of communication that work. We can communicate without speaking. So many of them communicate through their art. You have to see their expressive art to understand it. Many communicate through music, some communicate through dance. And sometimes just communicate by sitting next to each other and feeling relaxed in their body language, So having better communication, I think, is the only thing that I can see impeding us from being more inclusive.
Thank you so much, Madhura. That was wonderful. You've given us much to think about and definitely much to work on. So the conversation doesn't end here, it only begins. So we hope to catch you all again. Stay tuned for our next episode. But for now, this is Sohini signing off from the School for Lifelong Learning. Thank you for being with us.